Hello, hello.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Chris.
How's it going? We'll give people 5 minutes to get on before we get started.
Awesome.
Alexis can't make it today. He sends his regards, so I'll most likely be steering unless another TOC member graciously volunteers. So I see Ben Heinman is here.
Morning, Chris.
Hey, morning.
Hey, Chris, it's Annie. Do you want me to display the deck?
No, it's fine.
Okay. Very cool.
Should be pretty accessible via Google Slides.
Absolutely.
I pasted it in the chat, so hopefully everyone has seen it.
Oh no, absolutely perfect. And hey, since you're solo, I'll go ahead and just keep I'll keep the mutes up and down.
Yeah, no
Awesome.
worries.
All right, thanks, man.
Cool. Is that Brian Cantrell, or trying to see which Brian that is? Give people a couple more minutes. Anyone else from the TOC on here besides Ben?
You guys can hear.
Hey. Perfect. Give people another minute. Ken, do you want to steer since Alexis can't make it today, or do you want me to do it? It's up to you.
I am fine if you send the meeting.
Yeah.
Like the slides already.
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine doing it, Ken. If
Okay.
I won't spring it on you last minute.
Yeah. Either way, I'm good. Either way.
Cool. All right. Cantrell is on to Brian. Alrighty. It's been about 5 past. We'll get started now. From the TOC, I have Alexis sending his regrets today. Couldn't make it. He's away. I have Ken, Brian, and Ben on the line. If I missed anyone, let me know. I'll check before we end the call today. If we head to slide 5, we have a fairly short agenda today. There's no formal external community presentation today. So we're just going to go over some recent news and importantly, some previous things we've been working on, like the TOC principles and kind of an updated TOC election schedule. First off, if we go to slide 6, big news is CNCF has its 11th project. It's Envoy, which was sponsored by Alexis Richardson. Envoy essentially falls in the category of service mesh style technology, essentially a very fancy reverse proxy. It's been primarily driven by Lyft and Google and then some other folks. It's used by a ton of folks out there from Lyft, Google, IBM, Apple, Microsoft, Red Hat, Pivotal, and then so on. We're super stoked to have Envoy part of CNCF. And so we look forward to helping them grow their community. Does anyone have any comments on Envoy from the TOC or wider community?
Just welcome.
Cool. Awesome. So moving on, slide 7. Well, we have our 12th project also, which was brought in at the same time as Jaeger. Jaeger was sponsored by Brian Cantrell from the TOC. It was a project that was born out of Uber. It's essentially a full-blown distributed tracing system, kind of analogous to the Zipkin work and, inspired by, the seminal Google Dapper paper. It's built with open tracing support from the ground up and integrates with some other, CNCF technology. It's used by companies like Atlassian, Red Hat, Booking.com, Orange, and so on. So we're super stoked to have the Jaeger community part of CNCF and helping them grow. And personally, I think it's great to have a full-blown distributed tracing system part of CNCF. So thank you, Brian, again for sponsoring the project. Does anyone have any comments on Jaeger before we move on? Cool. I will take that people are happy. Thanks again, Brian. So moving on, slide 8. Some news from the staff. We have grown as a foundation over the last couple of years, both in membership projects and staff, and to kind of help, CNCF, serve its projects better. We've welcomed a new developer advocate to CNCF, Ihor. Some of you may have known him if you participate in the Kubernetes community, particularly in any of the product management SIGs, OpenStack, SIG, and so on. I'm super glad to have him to kind of help me better work with our projects and also be an external developer advocate for CNCF projects. So welcome, Ihor, and we're glad to have you here. I believe you're on the call, so feel free to say hello to folks.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really appreciated to join CNCF, so we're moving forward with that. Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, cool. Alrighty. Moving on. Slide 9 is kind of our this ongoing discussion around finalizing the TOC principles. We finally got the document together and distilled into a GitHub pull request. So please take a look at that and do comments on the actual pull request, and we'll refine it there. Our hope is to basically have that thing ironed out and hopefully ready for essentially finalization by the next TOC meeting. So please take a look at it. There's been a lot of work in it. So if you have any questions, feel free to comment on that GitHub or reach out to Dan, me, or Alexis personally. Anyone have any comments on the principles?
I'm glad to see us pushing that forward. That's going to be, I think, really helpful.
Yeah. Thanks, Ken. It's taken a little bit while, but I'm glad we're getting closer.
I also, this is Dan Kahn, just want to add that we have been sharing the Google Doc with the governing board. And so I do believe that the governing board will also be ready to endorse the principles after the TOC does.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, super stoked for that. Cool. Moving on, slide 10. This is just a periodic reminder that we're basically trying to catalog different project priorities, and we kind of have a review backlog of projects where we've looked at or are looking at. Anytime you think that there's a project appropriate for, CNCF or that the TOC should look at, please feel free to reach out to the list or file an issue on GitHub. CNCF and the TOC is, always welcome to look at potential project proposals. So, keep that in mind as we grow as a community. All right, slide 11. We've had some discussion over, Notary coming into the CNCF and having a formal vote. Technically, we're still in the due diligence period here. I don't think we're completely ready for a vote yet. We also don't have kind of a critical mass of the TOC here. So, I'm really leaning on the TOC to basically have a discussion around Notary here. So I don't know if Ken or anyone else wants to comment, but I don't think we're ready to kind of move on this.
Can we maybe have like a try to get the TOC together at the next call to have a discussion on this, or like maybe the next one after that if we don't have time the next time?
I'm hoping to get a little bit together before that because this has been going on for a while. So I would kind of like to come to a close on it, but
yeah, I'll definitely make time to have that discussion. Okay. I think it's an important one to have.
Cool.
And I would just make a quick call here for everyone else on the call that there's a group of folks who've been unhappy with Notary and have kind of, and not in a destructive way, I mean, in a useful way, have been making specific criticisms of it. But they need, this is really the next week or two is the time to apply an effort and write up a clear explanation of why Notary is not the right choice, of why, different technologies like GPG or things used in app or DNF or such meet those needs. But sometimes it's just the case that it's not enough to just talk on the edges. You really need to be very specific and clear about why we shouldn't go forward.
Yeah, just a comment from Quentin. I have not seen a lot of serious concerns about the actual project itself, but I think that distilling the proposal into something that the TOC can digest and vote on has proved challenging.
Yeah.
So I think just if we can consolidate all of that, pros, cons, etc., and make it much easier for the TOC to come to a conclusion, because there's lots of discussion and many comments, and but actually trying to make sense of that. It's particularly like me, if you're not actually an expert in this area, it's pretty difficult to to figure out how it compares with all the other technologies.
Yep. Yep. Totally agree, Quentin. So I mean, we'll put it as a task on our plate to try to kind of work and get that done with the TOCs, so we could actually come to a formal decision and potential vote. Cool. All righty. Thanks, everyone. All right, moving on. Slide 12. So, we essentially, as we've grown as a foundation and community, the TOC has kind of done a lot of, brunt of the work reviewing, proposals and doing due diligence. And, recently we've had this idea of kind of establishing a formal TOC contributor role to help, not only with, project due diligence, but also recognize, community members who are doing a lot of work and potentially, down the road, this type of experience would be great for a potential, spot and on the TOC. So we're growing this role, for folks who volunteer. There's a sign-up sheet, a Google sheet that I've been filling out as people comment. So please fill out a comment on that sheet if you're interested in being added as an official TOC contributor, and I'll add you, and then eventually we'll kind of finalize that and make a formal announcement and put folks on the website. So thank you for everyone who's already signed up and has done due diligence in the past for our projects. Any any questions on the TOC contributor? Cool. Moving on. All righty. So slide 13 is we recently posted on GitHub a updated election schedule, for the TOC. So feel free to take a look at it. When we started the organization, we essentially bootstrapped the TOC kind of with fairly long terms, and we're kind of updating things to kind of hopefully get fully, get a full-fledged TOC. One thing that's happening right now is the end user group is essentially going to formally elect, their TOC representative, which will replace Alyssa, who was on there initially. The next major kind of notable thing is in March of next year, we'll have 2 TOC slots, essentially open and a chairperson election at that time. The kind of big swath of governing board seats are going to be open on January 2019. So feel free to take a look at the schedule. It's a bit of a work to kind of put that together, but it's all fleshed out now, and I kind of look forward to having that all detailed in public for people to see. So as we ramp up selecting more members to the OC, it should be very transparent how things work. All right, any questions on the election schedule? Cool. Moving on. Slide 14. As I mentioned before, we're going to finally have an end user TOC slot filled, which will replace Alyssa. So we're hoping to basically have that done by the next TOC meeting. So hopefully that election is done and that person could participate in the upcoming TOC meeting in early October. So look for the news there. Cool. Any questions there? All righty. Slide 15, more kind of wonderful CNCF administrivia. The board has voted to allow 2 developer seats, essentially, committer seats from the community, folks who are essentially maintainers, because, we believe that it's strongly important to have a maintainer and developer voice on the board that represents, the community. So the way this is going to work is for bootstrapping, one of the seats will go to the Kubernetes Steering Committee to make an election of who the representative is, and the other seat will go to the 7 essentially non-inception level projects, within CNCF. We've already started, this process for soliciting nominees. If you're an official maintainer, you received an email. We're going through the voting, and hopefully by early next week, we'll make the announcement of who has secured that spot. We had 7 great, nominees for the election, and the current maintainers are putting their votes in on who will represent the essentially non-Kubernetes seat for the first time around, at least. Does anyone have any questions here?
I'll just add that we actually have 9 incubating level projects today, but the last 2, Jaeger and Envoy, came in just a little bit too late to be included.
Yep, that's part of the election. Yep, it was close, but next time. Alrighty, so basically to kind of finish things up is just a reminder, we have these amazing working groups. Please participate in them, especially if you're interested in any of the topics. They're either meeting every other week, monthly, or even weekly now. The serverless group is starting to meet on a weekly basis. If you go to slide 17, just a kind of a small update. Maybe Ken, you kind of want to speak to this, but if folks are truly interested in serverless, there's been some great activity with a bunch of companies. They're working on a white paper, which I linked off, that kind of gives you a great kind of landscape overview of what's really going on in serverless in the industry, especially from a cloud native perspective. There's even some discussions on coming up with kind of a event mapping spec to kind of provide a way to make sure your functions are portable across the different cloud providers, since all of them have these proprietary eventing events. Please get involved. Ken, do you have any comments on that, since I was essentially speaking for you, since you're the chair of the serverless working group?
You did great, Chris. So the only thing I would add is when we kind of started this work group, the intent was to just kind of like look at the space, try to understand how serverless and cloud native, if they have any relationships or what type of relationships they might have. I think the white paper is trying to sort of put a stake in the ground in terms of what at least the work group thinks about serverless in relation to cloud native. We've had Amazon sort of come on and say, well, why does it have to be containers and why does it have to be cloud native? And so having some, debates a little bit with Amazon, but for the most part, everyone else has sort of agreed with the scope of the document, and even Amazon came back and just had some light wording adjustments, so nothing really major in the end. And so definitely would like your input, all of TOC's input on the white paper. And then as you're looking at the white paper, keep in mind that we're trying to figure out what if anything, we want to do next, right? And so disbanding the work group is definitely an option. If we wanted to try to involve some type of a serverless a function component in this event mapping, like Chris referred to, we want to include some of that into next steps. That would be a perfect next step. If we want to look at some companies that are in the serverless space, like serverless.io and those types of companies, we could definitely start looking at bringing in projects or like components of or sub-projects within those larger projects that make sense from a cloud native standpoint. And so we're kind of open to like what are our next steps and looking for guidance from the rest of the TOC members on that.
Yeah, I'll share the white paper to the TOC list after this call, so to get some wider eyes on it before it's finalized. Any other comments regarding working groups or the serverless working group in particular?
I did have one more question. I forgot to do this last week, but Brian, do you have anyone at Google you could point to me that like get involved in this work group? Because I guess they're the only ones that are not as involved. If we had a name, but they're not too involved. I can get you that name if you need it.
I have the name. I can see what I can do
Okay.
to spur some more activity there.
Cool. Thanks, Brian.
Hey, Ken, Dan, just a quick question. Of the three, I believe there's three open source projects right now, all built on top of Kubernetes, that are trying to popularize it as a serverless platform. OpenFAS, Kubeless, and Fission.
Yep.
Did all three of them make presentations in the group, or just some of them?
We've only had, I think, a couple of them present so far.
I remember only Fission, as far as I can.
Fission, I thought Kubeless presented to the serverless group, but not to the TOC.
OpenFAS also presented to the serverless working group.
Because I think Kubeless presented to the Kubernetes community meeting.
Yep.
But I mean, one thing that I would love to see, I guess ideally out of the work group, would be a comparison of those three, especially if the three lead authors could actually agree on the comparison.
Sure.
Or discuss. I mean, that may be too
No, that makes sense.
too ambitious a goal.
Cool.
I think actually more interesting than the implementations might be the framework, serverless.com, which provides a portable abstraction across multiple different implementations.
Yeah, they're working within the working group. So.
Yep.
Any other comments? Alrighty. So slide 18, basically gonna kind of wrap things up. So the next meeting is October 3rd. We'll have a community presentation from the NATS community. Some of you may have remembered them. They were in discussion of potentially being a CNCF project in the early days, but they had some issues in potentially transferring the trademark over to the foundation, and it looks like that's finally cleared up. So they're super interested in having an opportunity to present the TOC again. So we'll see them next time around, and that's essentially it for today. We have quite a bit of extra time since we didn't really have any community presentations right now or a formal working group readout. So I'll essentially open it up to the floor for any other questions that the TOC wants to discuss, or potentially any community members, since we have a little extra time today.
Hi there. Just a quick question. This is Nathan McCauley from over at Docker, and I'm wondering if we could get some feedback maybe on what else would be needed to allow the TOC to be comfortable with Notary. We've done a couple months of back and forth, and kind of did a survey of peer-reviewed research. So not really sure what else we can do to help out there, but interested in guidance if there's anything we can help with.
I'm essentially going to defer to the TOC on that one. So, my thought is eventually we come to consensus and it's either goes for a vote or not. So, and that, essentially, I don't know if we want to time, time that decision to do that in 2 weeks or so on, but, it's really up to the TOC. So.
It's Quentin here. I can make a comment on that. I would recommend that the best way forward would be to get the TOC together and get them to enunciate what other information they need in order to be able to feel like they can make a decision, make a vote, and then we get back to Docker with that list of, this is what we're missing before we can vote.
Yep. Sounds completely fair.
So is this something, Patrick Chenezon from Docker here, is this something that will happen at the next TOC meeting?
It is my hope to try it for the next TOC meeting, but it really depends, how much we could kind of do before the next TOC meeting. So I'm hoping we do some work on an async basis before the next one, and hopefully we could come to a conclusion of vote or not.
So on a different topic,
Excuse me.
I'm guessing Alexis is not here.
Yep.
I have a question. Are we going to rediscuss the landscape at all, or did we?
Camille, I barely hear you, but I think your question is, are we going to rediscuss the landscape?
Settle that by reconfigure. Yes, sorry. I'm on a train and my connection is bad.
No worries.
Are we going to rediscuss it, or is it sort of, do we feel like it's settled now that we've reconfigured it back to its older configuration?
Yeah, I mean, I'll defer to the TOC on that one. I think we think we addressed the issues, but I'll let Dan and essentially the TOC to speak on that one.
I mean, we had a whole exchange of additional changes that were requested where Brian had suggested moving a box and such, and all those are coming in the next version. So I mean, it's designed to be an ongoing document and process. It's never supposed to actually finish. If I guess a couple people have suggested, oh, this isn't a useful project and it's something that we should just shut down because it winds up confusing people more than clarifying. Mm-hmm. So I mean, the TOC could certainly request that be done.
So just to be clear, Dan, what is the next version? That would be 0.9.8?
Right.
Okay.
But it's still a couple weeks off. I mean, it's just, Brian, we have like 50, not that many, call it 30 projects and logo updates and other things that have been requested. And so those are queued up. But we're hoping to get it next week.
Okay.
And then the changes that I agreed to.
Rushing you specifically, I'm just clarifying.
Yeah, and then the other piece going on in parallel is we do have this 1.0 version, which is the 3D. It was going to be a React application, interestingly, and we've now just taken an extra couple weeks to redo it in Vue.js due to the licensing concerns. But it just loads in a big YAML file of all of this data on all of those projects. And that data includes GitHub stars, Crunchbase funding, etc., and then lets you do live filtering on it. But even that is still never. Once we publish that, we're still just expecting to be essentially publishing identical data in two formats: one for browsing and one as a static image. But Camille, I mean, if you'd like to see more significant changes to it, please speak up. I am very open to it.
Yeah, no, I was mostly just sort of curious where we were. I've been looking at it a lot for other reasons lately,
Yep.
and so, you know, it's gotten a lot of attention from me. But
Cool.
So Camille, I guess I would be interested in a statement for you. Even despite its flaws or necessarily limits of a 2D.
I found it mostly helpful, so I'm glad we have it.
Yes, thank you for that. That's super helpful to hear.
Cool.
And just to be clear, the aspiration is for, except for occasional regressions like the CI/CD thing, for it to get better over time. So please do speak up if there's other changes people want to see in it.
Cool. All right. So any other kind of questions before we close this meeting? You know, I definitely want to make a point that I will work with TOC members to see if we could come to an answer on the notary question by the next TOC meeting. I think we definitely owe it to the community to finalize our due diligence.
I know one question I had for the committee was around the CNI on the networking work group. We're looking at bringing forth at least 2 projects that are CNI implementations.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not know if it would be good to do that at the next TOC meeting or to try to get maybe 1 or 2 more and then bring it at the following TOC meeting.
I would punt for later, Ken, because of the schedule. So,
Okay.
and it'll give us time to sync up.
Sounds good.
Alrighty, any other questions? Otherwise, I'll close it up and we'll give 30 minutes back to everyone. Next time we'll have Nats, and I'll reach out to see if I can get another formal kind of working group update from anyone.
Thanks, Chris.
All right. And we'll have a new TOC member, hopefully, too, from the end user community. So that'll be exciting. All righty. All right.
You know, actually, the very last thought that folks probably aren't up to speed on, but I'm just going to paste into this Zoom window the URL for the end user community. Mm-hmm. But we are up to 18 members now. 2 of them are on the down low, so there's 16 logos here. But we have folks like Reddit, Wikipedia, GitHub, New York Times, Bloomberg, that are actually kind of an impressive group of folks. And so I will just give the 30-second pitch that if you have customers or partners or colleagues at end user companies, and our definition of it is you don't provide cloud native services to your customers, then please have them take a look here or just connect them to me via email. We have the 2 kinds of membership where it's either essentially 50 grand a year or $4,500 a year. And I'll make a special pitch to the 2 TOC members on the phone who work for end user companies and are not yet members or supporters. But
I'm working on it.
Oh no, I know you both are. But it's a nice illustration of the fact that at CNCF, membership is totally decoupled from leadership roles.
Yeah.
Just know they're going to want to use a MasterCard to pay for the membership. we don't allow cash anymore in the building.
We're happy to refund them their 3% fees.
but Chris, just so you know, I do have access to Google Docs and Google Drive now. I finally got that through. Only took 3 months almost to get it. But
thank you.
I finally got it through. It's like working in like quicksand here.
but we are excited about that.
Was that Brian Grant?
Yes.
Sorry.
Is there a list of TOC candidates from the end user committee?
Let me think if we could share that. We do have a list. Let me think if we could share that a little bit broadly.
I think we could share it with the TOC, yeah. But I don't think we'd want to share it with the public list because it's sure. That we'd be fine too. But Brian, the nominations aren't over for another 4 days or something, and then we're happy to share it.
Okay, thanks.
All righty. Anything else? All righty. I'll close it off, and hopefully next time we'll have Alexis and his wonderful British voice instead of mine. So thank you everyone for your time, and we'll see each other in 2 weeks. Right. Take care.
Bye, folks.
Yeah. Bye bye.